You can
Okay,
start.
now we'll be discussing. Yeah, I'm ready. It's writing.
Yes, yes, please start.
Okay. Okay, today's topic would be diabetic retinopathy. The age risk factors would be between 24 to 75 years. Every three-fourth of the patients suffering from diabetes would develop diabetic retinopathy within 5 years. So coming to the risk factors are duration. Longer the duration, the longer the risk of developing diabetic retinopathy. Hyperlipidemia, hypertriglyceridemia, pregnancy. When a previously diagnosed woman who is pregnant and having the incident rate being 3%. So the most common risk factor for developing diabetic retinopathy would be the duration, the previous diabetic status of a pregnant woman, and altered metabolic functions. The best answer would be duration. So thus screening play an important role. So when do we screen the diabetic patients? In case of type 1 and type 2. In case of type 1, within 5 years of onset of the disease. In case of type 2 diabetes, he has to undergo screening at the time of the diagnosis. In case of pregnant women, she has to undergo screening every month, which is followed even after 1 year of postpartum. Coming to pathogenesis, there would be capillary changes in the retina and hematological changes in the retinal arteries and veins. This would cause microvascular occlusions, following which there would be retinal capillary non-perfusion. Since there is non-perfusion, the oxygen demand for retina increases and the retinal state would be hypoxic. Since there is hypoxia, there would be raised VEGF. This raised VEGF will cause release of reaction oxygen species, diacylglycerols, activation of protein kinase C, which will in turn cause microvascular permeability, which is responsible for developing of macular edema. More VEGF will cause NV devascularization elsewhere, NVI, neovascularization of iris, and NVA. Coming to clinical features, let's divide broadly into arterial changes and venous changes. As we know, this is the optic disc, and temporal to optic disc lies the macula, which constitutes of fovea, fovea centralis, the first sign of diabetic retinopathy will be microaneurysm. This is the earliest feature and the first sign. So the most important earliest sign in diabetic retinopathy is microaneurysm. What are these? These are nothing but saccular outpouchings. And they're usually seen in outer plexiform and inner nuclear layer. When the microaneurysm grow up, it forms dot blot hemorrhages. These are dot blot hemorrhages. And along the retinal nerve fibers, we have flame-shaped hemorrhage. So how do we distinguish between flame-shaped hemorrhages and dot blot? Coming to margins, dot blot hemorrhages are well defined, whereas flame-shaped, it is irregular. We see that dot flame-shaped hemorrhages are along the margins, along the retinal arteries or vessels, and they are linear, and the margins would be blurred. Whereas dot blot, it is more along the AV crossing junctions. And these are seen in outer plexiform and inner nuclear, whereas flame-shaped hemorrhages are seen in retinal nerve fiber layers. Coming to the next sign, cotton wool spots. Cotton wool spots are usually nothing but lipid deposits. They are usually represented in white in color. So what are cotton wool spots? Since we know that diabetes causes hematological and cellular changes, the increase for oxygen demand in retina increases. So as a result, the retinal vessels, which are usually the blood flow is lamellar. Since the oxygen demand increases, they become turbulent, attenuated. Attenuating is nothing but thinning of retinal vessels. So as a result, for defense mechanism, they start getting swollen, and this decreases the exoplasmic flow. And the exoplasmic flow is ischemia and get deposited in the form of cotton wool in other diseases. So there would be a question, there would be cotton wool spots are seen in. Cotton wool spots are seen in hypertensive retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy, retinopathy of prematurity, Purchker's retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy. Coming to hard exudates. Hard exudates are usually around the macula and they are in a circular fashion. And this term used is circinate. What is circinate? It's a circular fashionly arranged of hard exudates. What are hard exudates composed of? The hard exudates are composed of lipids. These are nothing but lipid deposits. So, to summarize, let's draw the 10 layers of retina. Coming to the outer layer, retinal pigment epithelium. Outer nuclear layer, outer plexiform, inner nuclear layer, inner plexiform, ganglionic cell layer, and retinal nerve fiber layer. So this is retinal nerve fiber, ganglionic cell, outer inner nuclear, inner plexiform, outer nuclear. So retinal flame-shaped hemorrhages are seen in retinal nerve fiber layers. Cotton wool spots are seen in the middle compact layer. The middle compact layer constitutes of Ganglionoid cell layer, inner nuclear and inner plexiform and outer plexiform. Dot blot hemorrhages are seen between outer plexiform and inner nuclear layer. Microaneurysms are also seen in outer plexiform and in inner nuclear. So the mnemonic would be OPIN, OPIN. So these are the arterial changes. Coming to venous changes. What are the venous changes? They're just three: bleeding, saculations, and outpouchings. So in a fundus photo, where you see all these features of hard exudates, veins tortuosity, what is bleeding, venous bleeding, saculations are nothing but vesicular lesions and cottonal spots. With microaneurysms. All these features are features of diabetic retinopathy. Coming to the classification, the most well-known and appreciated classification is ETDRS. It classifies the disease into non-proliferative and proliferative. So in non-proliferative, they're of mild, moderate, and severe. Coming to what is mild. Mild is nothing but any microaneurysm. Even if it is one microaneurysm, it's called as mild DR, irrespective to the location. What is moderate? Moderate is nothing but microaneurysms, hard exudates, and cottonal spots. Severe, remember in severe we have 4-2-1 rule. What is 4? When microaneurysms are seen in all 4 quadrants, meaning it's seen in the anterior pole, posterior pole, in the nasal part as well as temporal. In all 4 quadrants, if microaneurysms are seen, and any venous changes in 2 quadrants and 1 quadrant of IRMA. Coming to what is IRMA? IRMA is nothing but inner retinal microaneurysms. These are tiny microaneurysms seen at AV junctions between the arteries and veins, especially in the capillary regions. How do you distinguish if it is IRMA or if it is a bleed? Usually IRMA doesn't cross the major vessels. It is between the major vessels in between, whereas other bleed usually crosses the major vessels. And IRMA on FFA doesn't leak. Where other pre-retinal bleeds or inner retinal bleeds, they leak. When we do fundus fluorescent angiography, there is a hyperfluorescence. They shine brighter. So leaking is seen in bleeds, whereas in IRMA there is no leak. So what is severe? Any presence of any of this. Any one of these is also called as severe. Any one of the following option. So coming to proliferative. Proliferative is further divided into high risk, mild to moderate risk. What is high risk? High risk is nothing but NVD, neovascularization of the disc, with pre-retinal hemorrhage with vitreous hemorrhage, or neovascularization elsewhere with pre-retinal hemorrhage with vitreous hemorrhage, or neovascularization of the disc more than one-third of the disc area, or NVE more than half disc area. Meaning, what NVD is nothing but presence of disc vessels. Usually, there would be confusion between disc collaterals and disc neovascularization of the disc. How do we distinguish? These neovascularization around the disc, they rise from the surface, meaning they are elevated. When you visualize in the fundus photo or clinically, they appear to be elevated, whereas disc collaterals are flat. And this NVD have a brisk margins. The margins are not well defined. It's like a bunch of flowers, like a bouquet pattern, whereas disc collaterals have a well defined margins. So having a normal person having this collateral is normal. It is physiological, whereas NVD are pathological. Our alarm sign should ring when we see presence of NVD. We have to rule out the diseases and we have to take a proper systemic history. So this is about NVD. Coming to NVE. What is NVE? Neovascularization elsewhere, anywhere around the area. It can be well in the anterior pole, nasally or temporally, anywhere in the retina. However, the size should be more than half disc area, meaning it should be around 1500, half of 1500, because the disc diameter is 1500. It should be around 700 micrometers. Or anywhere with vitreous hemorrhage. Vitreous hemorrhage is usually bleed in the vitreous cavity with presence of NVE is called as iris. So remember what are the iris features would include NVD with pre-retinal hemorrhage with vitreous hemorrhage, NVE with pre-retinal hemorrhage with vitreous hemorrhage, NVD, NVE, and traction, macular tractional RD. All these are the features of proliferative iris diabetic retinopathy. Coming to pathogenesis of proliferative diabetic retinopathy changes. We know that NVD, NVE occurs. And when these bleeding occur, the fibroblasts proliferate. When fibroblasts proliferate, they tend to contract. When these fibroblasts contract, they pull the retina. When there is a bleed, these fibroblasts proliferate and they contract. When there is contract, there is traction on the retina. So that's what is called as tractional RD, and they are usually 10 shape. However, when this traction increases, that particular retina breaks. It is usually depicted in blue in color. That retina breaks, and when there is a break, it's called as combined RD. What is combined RD? Tractional RD with any retinal break is called as combined RD. And coming to diabetic macular edema. Why does diabetic macular edema occur? Diabetic macular edema occurs because there is increased microvascular permeability. And the most important classification is modified IL classification. So there are three categories. Retinal thickening noticed within 500 micrometers of the fovea. So first would be retinal thickening within 500 micrometers of the fovea. Second, hard exudates within 500 micrometers of the fovea or adjacent retinal thickening. Adjacent to hard exudates, their retina is thickened. That's the second classification. The third, retinal thickening more than one disc area, and however the part of which should lie within 500 micrometers. So all these are the classification of diabetic macular edema. Remember, all diabetic macular edema can be clinically significant macular edema, but not vice versa. So all diabetic patients having diabetic macular edema, we can call it as CSME, but not all CSME are DMEs. So coming to diagnosis, how we diagnose? Clinically, it is doctor's examination. Coming to laboratory test, we have to, what are the laboratory tests required? LFT, RFT, FBS, 24 hours urine protein, lipid profile, HbA1c. As we know that HbA1c will tell us the status of diabetes, and we have to monitor HbA1c to know if the metabolic activity is controlled or not. HbA1c more than 6.5 is significant. Why LFT and RFT? Once there is PDR, we have to take the patients for laser or surgery. So we want them to be normal. Coming to 24-hour urine proteins, ketone would be first detected in the urine, followed by fructose. So this would pick up better. And this is a most common, easily accessible test which can we do. So coming to ophthalmological examination, we do OCT, angio, fundus photo, angiography. What is OCT? OCT is nothing but a non-invasive method to assess the chronicity of the disease if macula is involved, presence of hard exudates. All the 10 layers of retina is picturized in the screen. All the patient has to do is to focus on the fundus camera, and it will tell us what is the level of macula, what is the status, if the macula has edema or not, and helps in the treatment options. Whereas what is OCT angio? OCT angio is a non-invasive method to analyze the caliber of blood flow in the retina using RBC movements. They track the RBC movements in the retinal vessels. Coming to FFA is an invasive where the fluorescent dye is injected into the eye, and we come to know if the retina is perfused, non-perfused. It will tell the capillary non-perfusion area, presence of NVDs, NVE, or any pre-retinal or inner retinal layers bleed. So what are the treatment options? So the treatment is usually divided into lasers, surgery, and anti-VEGF. How do you know what patient is undergoing what? So in the OCT, if we see edema in the central of the macula, in the fovea or in the fovea centralis or within the macula, the plan of action would be anti-VEGF. If it is peripheral to the macula, then we can do laser. Why can't we do laser in macula? Because laser is very destructive. Once we hit the macula, it will cause permanent disruption of the vision. So laser is done only in non-centrally involving diabetic macular edema in the periphery of the retina. So any patient having disease within the center of the macula, always the best option would be anti-VEGF followed by surgery. So coming to mechanism of laser. Usually laser converts hypoxic retina into anoxic retina. They increase the oxygen demand. When the oxygen demand is increased, anti-VEGF secretion is inhibited. So thus there is decrease in VEGF. When VEGF is decreased, the microvascular permeability decreases, thus NVD and NVE decreases. So what is the laser used? The laser used is Nd:YAG 532, double frequency Nd:YAG laser. So in laser, we have options called as focal laser. When there's a presence of microaneurysm, I just hit this part of the microaneurysm. This is called focal laser. The second one is grid laser. When the microaneurysm is scattered, I would target the area where there is more number of hemorrhages and I would form a grid. I would secure the borders with the laser. So this is called grid laser. One more is called pan-retinal coagulation, photocoagulation, PRP. Pan-retinal photocoagulation, and the mechanism of action is nothing but photocoagulation. The energy or the wavelength used is 532 micrometers. And the spot size is usually 0.5 to 0.3. And the maximum I can hit is 1000 spots. 6,000 spots. So there's usually a tendency that once we laser, we don't follow a pattern. There's a pattern for laser. We can't laser everywhere. So we have to follow within the arcade and we have to not hit the macula. So what are the guidelines? The guideline says we have to avoid the 500 micrometer zone of the macula. And there should be a spacing between two laser spots. There should be a spacing of at least 0.5 micrometers. And the recent advances, we have a new mission called Pascal. What is Pascal? It is semi-automated mission. Once we press the foot pedal, only in the half press the laser hits. So the other half, the retina is not being hit. What is the advantage? It reduces the scarring. It reduces the pain and decreases the patient having from scotoma. Since we hit the retina, that part of the vision is gone for the patient. So this Pascal, it will decrease the amount of the energy, not the full energy is going. Just with the half press, the retina is being hit. So therefore, there is decreased scarring to the patient, decreased pain, and decreased scotoma complaints. This is all about laser. Coming to anti-VEGF. What does anti-VEGF do? These are nothing but recombinant biomolecular particles they inhibit VEGF secretion. Once VEGF is decreased, according to pathogenesis, we know that the vascular permeability decreases, the hematological changes decreases, the capillary perfusion increases. So they decrease the VEGF by binding to the VEGF. So if this is a VEGF molecule, the anti-VEGF binds to one of the arm of the VEGF and prevent the pathogenesis of the disease. So what are the anti-VEGF available in the market? Ranibizumab, aflibercept, aflibercept, brolizumab, bevacizumab. All these bind to the VEGF. The additional feature of aflibercept is they bind to VEGF A, VEGF B, VEGF B, and they also bind to placental inhibiting growth factor. This is the most important and the recent advances. So since they bind to VEGF A, VEGF B, and placental growth factors, the action duration of action is longer and it can be given 6 monthly. The dosage is 2 microgram per ml. And the common names of ranibizumab in the market is Lucentis, bevacizumab is Avastin, aflibercept is Eylea. How coming to contraindications, VEGFs are contraindicated in patients of MI, stroke, pregnancy, So any patient who's having myocardial infarction, stroke, pregnancy, VEGFs are contraindicated. In these patients, laser are the best options. Coming to steroids, we
Doctor,
can even use.
sorry to interrupt. We have less than 2 minutes since this is uh, this free version of Zoom. It gets over
Okay,
in 45 minutes. So,
I'll just
uh,
finish in 2 minutes.
yeah, and by any chance, is there any MCQs?
Yes, I will forward it to you.
Okay. No, not about. Okay, okay. You finished this off. We have less than 2 minutes, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to steroids, what are the options available? Ozurdex or triamcinolone. And when do we do surgery? Surgery is usually done in premacular hemorrhage, tractional RD, threatening the macula, combined RD, subbiloid bleed involving the macula. In all these, we prefer doing surgeries involving premacular hemorrhage, tractional RD, combined RDs, subbiloid hemorrhage with macular hemorrhage, or recurrent vitreous hemorrhage. In all these surgeries option, what surgery? Pars plana vitrectomy. So coming to the question, what is the earliest sign in diabetic retinopathy? Option 1, microaneurysm. 2, ard exudates. 3, cottonelle spots. 4, IRMA. So the answer would be the earliest sign is microaneurysm. A 62-year patient, male patient, a 62-year male patient who is on aspirin, clopidogrel, has severe non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. What are your treatment options? Option A, anti-VEGF. Option B, laser. Option C, observe. Option 4, surgery. So the answer would be laser, since the patient is on aspirin. Clopidogrel is a known case of MI or a stroke, so VEGFs are contraindicated. Why not surgery? Surgery is not done in non-proliferated diabetic retinopathy. It's only preferred in proliferated diabetic retinopathy. We don't observe, as there is this